Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome back to another 2020 update of the presidential election. Um, Whatever. The I just took a quick glance, and my camera does not like the shirt I chose to wear today. I want to talk about kind of each candidate's floor, each candidate's ceiling, and a few states that might or might not flip in 2020. Kind of give a brief overview. And some interesting news is it looks like Trump is actually going to have a fundraising and financial advantage in terms of how much he can spend on advertising and the like. And it's actually kind of surprising because historically speaking, Democrats have had a slightly better fundraising apparatus, and maybe better grassroots connection. Certainly, certain candidates like Bernie Sanders absolutely have been able to turn out a lot of small dollar donations. And they've had a fairly stable group of large, well to do donors, but typically they donate at these large gatherings or these fundraising dinners and all that type of stuff. And the Biden campaign has been having trouble getting these funds because, well, everything's under lockdown and you can't have these donations, these fundraising dinners. Whereas the Trump campaign has a very strong grassroots effort and a very strong online ability to gather donations. And could this matter? Certainly. It really could. In the words of one Democratic fundraising manager, whatever the official title for this person is, they were like, we lost when Clinton had a massive financial advantage over Trump. How can we expect to win when we're getting beaten by Trump in the financial area? And it is kind of interesting when you look at the polling data that the majority of voters, I think it was like 51%, trust Trump over Biden when it comes to mitigating the results of any recession or pulling us out of a recession after everything gets reopened than they do Biden. They trust Trump more on the economy, despite the pandemic's potential crashing of the market. We'll see whether or not quarter two actually shows any economic loss. It more than likely will. It almost certainly will. But I doubt quarter three will have any loss, and we will probably see a gain in quarter three. Simply because I don't expect things to be closed by November. And if we see economic growth in quarter three, I mean, that's going to take anything off of it. I love all these people saying, yeah, we're in a recession right now. No, we aren't. We don't know if we're in a recession. If we have two consecutive quarters of negative economic growth, then yeah, we'll be in a recession. And it will have started, when the market took a massive nosedive, when people realized this coronavirus thing was much worse than initially expected. But if we see one quarter of decline and then a quarter of growth, we're not in a recession. It's just kind of how it works. And of course, for people saying we're in a depression, well, no, that's 2 years of continued economic decline. So 8 consecutive quarters where each quarter has a loss over the previous quarter. And I highly doubt that's going to happen. That's why I personally call this the panic of 2020, not a recession, because I doubt we're actually going to see 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. But let's actually get into talking about, the floor for Donald Trump. And I've actually got it at any state that's in red is currently what I have is Donald Trump's floor. I'll throw in Ohio as well. I honestly believe that Donald Trump's floor is 219. Basically, the Romney states plus Ohio and Iowa minus Arizona. And Trump's floor, I would argue, or ceiling, I would argue that I'll throw in Minnesota as well. I would argue that this is Trump's ceiling, unless something dramatic changes. I could hear arguments for Nevada. I don't really buy the arguments for Colorado and New Mexico, not yet at least. And I can see Virginia, but I don't think it'll be anything. I don't think Virginia will flip. It could be very close, and I'm talking within 1%, but I'm not ready to buy the arguments that Virginia could flip right now. And, I thought maybe earlier in the year I could buy those arguments, but I think Nova's just too big now that I've done a little bit of additional looking at the numbers and all that stuff. Nova's just too big and too Democratic leaning, so especially with Biden as the nominee. With Sanders, absolutely, I would almost be willing to put Virginia in the red column to begin with, but, that would be, admittedly, that's somewhat of a personal bias, but I really do think Sanders has a suburbs problem, and that would really hurt him in a place like Loudoun and Prince William County. But with Biden, I don't see it happening. But I currently think the most likely result would be the most likely electoral college outcome is here, but that's because, and actually I think Arizona is going to be closer than Wisconsin is, simply because Arizona is moving more and more towards the Democrats in a lot of regards, and Trump isn't exactly the type of Republican Arizona likes. But, if we're going to talk about, potential paths to 270, this is Trump's easiest path to 270 without going over. If we're talking about without going over, I think Biden's would be without going over. So you need to find a way to gain 2. Oops. Without going over, I'm thinking you could make the argument that this could be Biden's easiest, but if we allow candidates to go over, certainly this would be the easiest, and maybe even throw in Arizona too. North Carolina, I'm not ready to buy just yet. Florida's an interesting state, and I don't know how to actually look at Florida in a lot of ways, because a lot of the state has been getting a lot redder, and a lot of the state has been getting a lot bluer, and that hilariously balances out perfectly, and it's still the swingiest of the swing states, because it will do whatever Florida does. But the data is just really interesting, especially with most polls showing Biden with a national lead of 5 to 9%. There's still an extremely high number of undecideds in the vast majority of those polls, and I'm really not buying the argument that Donald Trump's floor is lower than 45%, especially when it seems his floor in terms of approval rating is 43%. And that's his absolute floor. And I'm talking about the average. Certain polls will have him down lower, certain polls will have him up higher. But 44% seems to be, 44 to 45% is about where his approval rating is. And presidents almost always exceed their approval rating when it comes to their performance in the national vote. And this is actually true at the state level as well. With exceptions. There are always exceptions. But Donald Trump is probably going to get about 45 to 46% of the vote as a base. He could get up to 47, maybe 48%. I'm struggling. I'm not sure if he can crack 50, but 48 would be enough for him to win the Electoral College. even if Biden got every other vote. I'm not certain that Biden can crack 52%. We'll see if he can hit 50, and I think it's possible that he hits 50, but Trump is going to be at 47, 46 to 47, and the GOP has about a 4% cushion in the popular vote where they can still win the Electoral College. And a lot of people are going to say, well, that's the reason we need to get rid of it. There are a lot of reasons why we shouldn't. Of course, I'm one of the rare people who thinks the Electoral College is generally good and that only a few minor tweaks need to be made. But if we're talking about the idea that this is a competitive election, well, I certainly agree that it's a competitive election. And there was actually a good period last week where my forecasting model, which of course the link is in the description, actually showed this being the presidential map for. I've excluded the gradients. I haven't included the gradients, and this is certainly a possible outcome, and I think it's well within reason. I could even see a reasonable person throwing in North Carolina in this map. But I don't believe any forecast that includes Georgia. I don't believe any forecast that includes Texas in the Biden column. And certainly not any forecast that I can also see a forecast including Ohio and Iowa. But not Georgia, not Texas. And my reasoning for that is those states are just too red. Even though they have been moving towards the Democrats, they're still just too red. They're too Republican leaning for that to change. But obviously we'll see. The other thing I want to talk about is campaign strategies. Biden doesn't seem to have one. I'm not sure what exactly why that is. I think it's just, ad campaigns and Twitter, but I haven't seen any Biden ads. I haven't seen any real effort from Biden to try and win. Whereas, and maybe someone who's actually following the Biden campaign a lot more closely. Can point me into resources so I can check them out and verify the quality of those. But even without following Trump's campaign heavily or really at all, I see tons of Trump ads. I see a lot of information about what the Trump campaign is doing virtually and how they're contacting voters in states like New Mexico and Arizona and Colorado and Nevada in the Midwest and places like that. And it leads me to believe that the Trump campaign has their heads on straight and has a plan that they're executing, and the Biden campaign is, just like the man himself, trying to figure out who they are. Let's be honest here, Biden does not seem like somebody who is all there upstairs. And it's actually kind of sad looking at it. And I don't think he's going to do well in a debate. Simply because Biden is a little too passive. He was ceding time during the Democratic debates, and in this modern era of political debates, it's not a good idea to do that because you already have an extremely limited amount of time. And I think that also hurts campaigns in general, and that hurts the political discourse in America. When our campaigns or when our political debates are time limited, both in terms of their viewing time slot, but also when they limit the candidates' time to speak. Because instead of being able to get their specific policy goals and their specific ideals, what winds up happening is it's a competition to get the best soundbite, and that's not going to help anyone. It just isn't. But anyway, that's kind of where things stand. Currently, my model has this being the map for 2020 in November. And I think that's within reason, but we'll see what happens. If y'all like the content, as always, likes, comments, subscriptions really do help, and I greatly appreciate them. And hope y'all enjoyed. I'll see y'all next time. Take it easy. Have a nice day. Bye bye.